Hey everyone, welcome back. You ever feel like, I don't know, like the concrete jungles got you totally out of sync? Or maybe like you're really craving that weekend camping trip?
Mm-hmm.
We're diving into that kind of fundamental human nature push and pull today.
Yeah.
Like, how have different cultures throughout history viewed and interacted with their environment?
Right.
We're talking everything from like awe-inspiring harmony to, well, let's just say things haven't always been a walk in the park.
Yeah, definitely not.
So we're calling this deep dive Humanity and the Biosphere. And, we've got some seriously thought-provoking excerpts lined up for you.
Well, what I think is so fascinating is that even the way we talk about this stuff often reveals a really human-centric bias.
Mhm.
Take, for instance, the word anthropology itself.
Okay, hold on. Back up a sec. What exactly do you mean by human-centric? And why is that even like a potential issue when we're talking about, well, the entire asterisk biosphere?
Oh, that's a great point. It's so easy to just kind of fall into this trap of seeing ourselves as separate from the natural world, or even like superior to it in some way. And
Yeah.
anthropology, by definition, it's the study of asterisk humanity, asterisk, right? So it sometimes reinforces that separation without even meaning to.
So it's like we're already starting from this point of view that kind of assumes humans are like at the tippy top of this pyramid.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not even like a new thing, right? Think about Darwin.
Oh, right.
His whole theory of evolution, which was revolutionary, right? It linked humans to the natural world, but in a
Yeah.
way that was like asterisk, really asterisk radical for his time. And actually, people were not okay with it.
I can imagine. It's wild to think about how groundbreaking those ideas were back then.
Yeah.
People weren't exactly like lining up to be called descendants of apes, all right?
Exactly, exactly. It really challenged like asterisk centuries asterisk of thinking that put humans outside of the natural order. But even today, that human-centric bias, it tends to stick around. And so while different cultures around the world, they have tons of different views on nature, tons of different relationships with nature, that human-centric bias, it's kind of always lurking.
It makes you wonder how much that bias influences how we actually interact with the environment, like how we treat it.
Totally.
And how can we even begin to untangle this whole complex relationship between us and the environment when we're like starting from such a potentially skewed perspective?
Well, one really helpful lens, I think, is this idea of something called cultural ecology. Are you familiar with that term at all?
It's familiar. I've definitely heard it before,
Yeah.
but I'll admit I'm not totally clear on like what it actually asterisk means, asterisk go. Could you give us a little like a quick breakdown, cultural ecology 101?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, cultural ecology looks at how the environment actually asterisk shapes asterisk societies and how they develop.
Okay. So instead of just focusing on how like humans impact the environment, which I think is what we're used to,
Right.
this is sipping it and saying, how does the environment impact asterisk?
Exactly. It's really trying to understand how humans adapt to different environments, kind of like, other organisms do. And it's really interesting, this concept. It has roots in American anthropology, which I think adds a really interesting layer to our deep dive here.
Ooh. Okay, I like it. Always down for a little interdisciplinary exploration.
Right. And there are some really interesting parallels we can draw between cultural ecology and, believe it or not, Marxism.
Whoa, okay. Did not asterisk, see that coming? Connect those dots for me. What do nature and Karl Marx have in common?
It really comes down to this idea of material factors, right? Like the actual physical and environmental conditions that influence how societies grow and develop. So for cultural ecology, it's all about the environment being that key material factor. And with Marxism, it's more about economic systems. But both theories, they kind of challenge that idea that human nature is everything. They point to these sort of outside external forces that are playing this really significant role.
So both of these theories are saying, like, look, we're not just masters of our own destiny, right? We're also shaped by the world around us.
Exactly.
There's always a however, right?
Of course, there's always more to it. Both theories, and I think especially cultural ecology, have their limitations. They don't fully capture that power of human agency, or intention. They don't fully capture all the nuances of culture itself. It's not just a simple equation.
So it's not just about, like, okay, the environment dictates how we live, end of story.
No, not at all.
There's more to it than that.
Way more to it. Think of it this way. Okay. Marx famously said that the invention of the steam engine directly led to industrial capitalism.
Okay.
And while, yeah, technology plays a huge role, huge asterisk role in shaping society, it's not the be-all, end-all. Human choices matter, cultural values, power dynamics, all that factors in.
It's like saying, okay, the invention of the smartphone automatically created the gig economy.
Right.
Like, there's so much more to the story.
Exactly. And to kind of illustrate this point even more, let's dive into a really fascinating comparison that this chapter digs into. We're going to look at two drastically different societies, one in Bali and one in Morocco.
Bali and Morocco. Okay, you really got my curiosity going. What's the story there?
So we're going to look at the work of anthropologist Clifford Geertz.
Okay.
And he looked at how water availability, or the lack thereof, influenced social structures in these two really, really different places.
Oh, wow. Two different cultures grappling with the same element, but in such different ways. This is going to be good. Tell me more.
Yeah, so picture Bali, right? Like a lush island, tons of rainfall. Geertz observed this whole system of shared irrigation and deep cooperation among Balinese farmers. They developed these things called subaks. Yeah, they're these really sophisticated irrigation networks, and they're managed like totally collectively by the community.
Oh, wow. So even though water was relatively plentiful, they still had to work together to harness it and manage it effectively.
Exactly. And this sense of cooperation that he observed, it wasn't just about being practical. It was deeply intertwined with their cultural and religious beliefs as well. He noticed that even their rituals and ceremonies often revolved around the rice growing cycle, which of course is directly tied to that availability of water.
Wow, so their whole way of life was connected to this one essential element. It's a really powerful example of how the environment can shape us, right?
Totally. Yeah. It really is. Now let's shift gears and head over to Morocco, right? Where water, it's a much, much scarcer resource.
Okay.
Can you imagine how that might change things?
I'm already feeling a sense of competition creeping in just thinking about it.
You're totally right, because Geertz found that in Morocco, right, access to water, it was a huge point of contention. And so instead of this shared management that you saw in Bali, you had families competing for control of wells. There was a strong, strong emphasis on individual ownership.
So the same element, water, leading to drastically different social structures depending on its availability, that is mind-blowing.
Right. And it highlights that profound impact that our environment can have on social patterns, cultural practices. But it's important to note here, Geertz wasn't saying that the environment dictates everything .
Right. It's not like we're puppets on a string, completely at the mercy of our surroundings.
Right. Exactly. It's more like he was illustrating how our relationship with the environment,
right,
our dependence on it, our struggles to manage it, that can shape us in some pretty profound ways.
It's like the environment sets the stage, but we still have the power to write the play. We still have choices.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. And while Geertz's work, it offers this really, really fascinating look at cultural ecology in action. There are even more contemporary views that really kind of challenge this traditional divide that we often put between nature and culture.
Okay, I'm always up for challenging old ways of thinking. Tell me about these newer perspectives.
So one anthropologist, his name is Tim Ingold, he argues that we don't simply exist in our environment, but we create ourselves through our constant interaction with it. It's much more fluid, much more dynamic than we often acknowledge.
So it's not just this one-way street where the environment shapes us. We're also actively shaping it in return, even as it shapes us.
Exactly. And this idea of this two-way co-evolutionary relationship, it's explored even further when we look at domestication.
Okay, domestication. My mind immediately goes to images of, humans taming wild animals.
Right.
But I have a feeling there's more to it than that.
Yeah. There's always another side to the story. And anthropologists like Liazoun and others, they've argued that domestication is this two-way street where humans and animals are shaping each other over time.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about us imposing our will on nature, but it's this really fascinating interplay of adaptation and mutual influence.
Exactly. It challenges this very simplistic view that humans are the sole agents of change in the world. And then we have another anthropologist, Philippe Descola, whose work kind of shakes things up even more.
Okay.
He challenges the very idea of a universal nature-culture divide.
Wait, slow down.
Yeah.
How can there not asterisk, be a difference between nature and culture? Like, my brain's kind of struggling to wrap itself around that concept.
Yeah, no, it's a big one. So Discola is arguing that instead of this one universal nature that exists, like totally independent of us, he's saying that different cultures have vastly different ways of relating to the non-human world. And these different ways of relating, they lead to entirely different ways of like categorizing and understanding what nature, even asterisk, is asterisk.
Okay, that's really intriguing. But can you give me an example? Like, what kind of different perspectives are we talking about here?
Yeah, so he outlines four main ontologies, or ways of understanding being.
Okay.
There's animism, totemism, naturalism, and analogism.
Okay.
So with animism, everything in nature, trees, rivers, mountains, it's all seen as having this spirit or soul that can directly interact with humans.
So it's like the planet itself is like alive and aware, full of these other beings that we can communicate with.
Exactly, exactly. In totemism, you have a special connection between specific human groups and what we might call like natural totems. So certain animals, certain plants, natural phenomena.
Like clan animals, sacred groves, that kind of thing. I've heard of those concepts.
Right, exactly. And then there's naturalism, which is like the dominant view in many Western societies. It emphasizes that separation that we were talking about earlier, where humans are distinct from nature.
Viewing nature as something separate from us, something to be studied, controlled, or unfortunately exploited.
Yes, exactly. And then finally, there's analogism, which sees everything as interconnected, but through this really complex system of analogies and correspondences.
Okay, I think I need a little more explanation on that one. Analogies and correspondences. Like, what does that look like in practice?
Think of it like, think about the concept of like the great chain of being, right? Where every living thing has its place in a hierarchical order. So you've got minerals, you've got plants, animals, humans, and beyond, right? But they're all interconnected and they all kind of reflect and correspond to each other.
So many different ways of seeing the world and our place in it. It's kind of mind-blowing. But what would you say is like the key takeaway for our listeners here? When it comes to these like diverse ontologies, what's the big idea?
I think the crucial point here is that our relationship with nature, how we perceive it, how we interact with it, how we value it, it's far more culturally diverse and complex than we often realize. There's no one right way to see it. And that's huge. It has huge implications for how we think about addressing our global challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. We've covered so much ground already in this deep dive, from Darwin to the rice paddies of Bali, indigenous cosmologies to, and you even mentioned this earlier, I'm really curious where this is going to go, something about waste.
Right.
I mean, talk about a lot to process. I mean, from indigenous cosmologies to the concept of waste, that's quite a leap. But hey, I trust you've got a master plan here, right? Connecting all these threads for us.
Oh, there's definitely a connection, I promise. Let's be honest, the word waste doesn't exactly, like, spark joy,
Yeah, not really.
But what we consider waste, a lot of times it's really more about our cultural perceptions than, like, the inherent value of the thing itself.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example. How can waste be more about, like, our perspective than actual value?
Okay, so think about hair, right?
Okay.
Hair on your head, totally normal, maybe even like stylish, right?
Right.
But imagine you're eating a bowl of soup, delicious soup, and you find a stray hair in it.
Ugh, yeah, not good.
Suddenly it's disgusting. It's waste.
Right.
Same hair, totally different context, totally different reaction.
Okay, that's a pretty vivid illustration. So something's only really waste when it's out of place. Right. Or like deemed undesirable within a certain specific cultural context.
Exactly. And anthropologist Mary Douglas, she explored this in depth. She talks about like dirt and pollution as matter out of place.
Matter out of place. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's stuff that disrupts our sense of order, our sense of purity.
Okay, I get that. But how does this idea of matter out of place connect to like actual garbage and recycling, like the stuff we physically discard?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a metaphorical connection, but it goes surprisingly deep, I think. Because when something is considered out of place in a society, right, it becomes, undesirable, maybe even dangerous. And as uncomfortable as it is to think about, the same logic can be applied to people too.
Whoa, okay, so you're taking this to a whole other level.
Okay.
We're talking about how certain groups of people can actually be labeled as like undesirable or even human waste as a way to like justify their marginalization or exclusion?
Yeah, it's a difficult reality, but it happens all the time. Think about how often stereotypes about, dirtiness or chaos are used to define groups that are seen as other, right?
Yeah.
And then that's used to justify their exclusion.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful and really disturbing parallel.
It really makes you think about that word recycling, in a whole new light.
Right.
Because if we can recycle plastic, we can recycle paper, does that mean we can, like metaphorically speaking, recycle people back into positions of value?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it actually goes right back to that idea of the two-way street that we keep talking about. If our relationship with the environment, if it really is this reciprocal exchange, then how we treat each other, how we value or devalue certain groups, that becomes part of that ecological equation as well.
Man, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. I mean, we've gone from Darwin's revolutionary ideas to the rice paddies of Bali, from indigenous cosmologies to this like really unsettling notion of human waste.
That's a lot to process.
It really is.
Yeah.
And really highlights just how complex and honestly how important these questions about humanity's relationship with nature, with each other, really are, especially today.
Absolutely. And, maybe it's not even about finding all the answers. Maybe it's more about, like you said, asking the right questions.
And maybe, just maybe, changing our own actions in big ways and small to create a more harmonious and just world for everyone and everything.
I love that.
To our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those questions coming and keep exploring the amazing connections all around us.